Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Juicing the Orange podcast. This is episode 11. We are kicking off the new year with season 2, and we are honored today to have Wayne Greaves. Dr. Greaves, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited because not only am I interviewing you today, but I'm excited because we're celebrating a milestone. We have 10 published podcast episodes. And so we want to celebrate and highlight the fact that we have reached this milestone. Listen, folks, it might not be a big deal to you, but the average podcast starts fading after episode 10. It's pod fade. And so we ought to celebrate the fact that we are still going and still growing. And so we're kicking off episode 11 with Dr. Wayne Greaves. We're excited to have him today. So we're going to dive right into his story. So who is Wayne Greaves?
I'd say Wayne Greaves is someone who's trying to navigate life, dealing with the ups and downs in life, and trying to make the best and the most of I can of what gifts and things have been offered to me, hoping to live an exemplary life and to make the world a bit better for those who come after me.
That's very profound. So can you tell us a little more about yourself, your roots, where you are from, things like that?
Yes, so I grew up in Barbados, in the Caribbean, of course. I'm the oldest of 4 children, and I grew up not in the city, but in a rural area. But of course, Barbados is a small place. It's only 21 miles long, so navigate to school in the city every day, and came up in a family setting where it's pretty strict, typical West Indian parents, I'd say. My dad was very involved in church, and so we grew up in that context. Mom was very compassionate and caring, so we got that aspect from her. But it was a good childhood, and then I got to go to a very good grammar school, great education. Eventually left Barbados and came to Canada, to McGill, and went to college and university and so on there, medical school.
Nice. So you have been privileged to live in various regions of the world. And so you started in the islands, went up to Canada. What was it like transitioning to a more colder region for you?
That was quite something. Actually, the first Christmas or winter season, it was lovely. And I was really more enamored with the snow. But by the time the second season came around, I still couldn't understand why was it so beautiful and bright sunlight outside and so beastly cold when I walked through the door. So that was a struggle after the first winter. Going into the second winter, it was a lot of snow. I mean, I love Montreal for the culture, the beauty, the whole French ambiance, and going to McGill, it was a tremendous experience. But the winters, forget it.
Brutal. Yeah,
Brutal.
I lived in Michigan for 3 years, and I vowed to never move back there again once I graduated from seminary. I'm a Florida boy, so I'd rather experience some warmth than that frigid tundra. But you know what? We have to appreciate the seasons in life because they each teach us something. And
You're
so,
right.
I'm grateful you had that experience. And somehow from there, you went on to med school. Where did you matriculate from med school?
Yeah, so in Montreal, McGill, of course, was very, very competitive. Very few Black folks in medical school, and even to get to medical school, it was quite a chore. Of course, you apply to many medical schools hoping to get into one, but McGill, I had good experience and did very well in undergrad, and so I was lucky enough to get into medical school at McGill, and that was another really tremendous experience, being able to be exposed both to the French and to the English. I enjoyed my time in Montreal, I must say. Medical school was a big challenge, I must tell you. After cruising through undergraduate at McGill and getting straight A's, I got into medical school, and my first class in histology, I flunked it. I said,
Wow.
Because now you're competing with the best of the best.
Right.
It was a different game altogether. I had to really up my game significantly to keep up.
Wow. So you had an F in a class at the beginning of your journey in med school.
That's right.
What motivated you to keep going? Why didn't you give up?
I tell you, what really motivated me to keep going was my dad. I mean, I knew that he'd saved up his money to just get me to be able to go to medical school at McGill. I mean, even though I had a bursary, a kind of small scholarship, we needed more money, and I knew the effort that he had made. So I said, I can't do this. I have to pass. And so that kept me going when I was tempted to give up, because it was tough. It was so much work. I'd never had to read so much or remember so many things. So it was challenging, but I just thought I had to persevere for my dad's sake.
Wow. Wow. So you identified your why and you allowed that to motivate you, and you worked hard, and you did become a doctor.
Yep, sure did.
So where did you end up practicing, and what area did you focus in?
So the way it goes, of course, you do your internship, your residency. So I chose to do internal medicine. And then I chose to do infectious diseases for a number of reasons. At one point during my time at McGill, my wife became quite ill and had to be hospitalized. And the doctors, to me, who were caring for her, I wasn't exactly happy with what they were doing. So I started to do some research on my own and got interested in reading about infectious diseases. And furthermore, I learned that it was a specialty that I wouldn't have to be on call at nights like often other specialties would have to be. And that kind of drove my direction to go towards infectious diseases. But it also meant that I had to leave Montreal to come to the US, because infectious disease was a full-fledged specialty here, whereas in Canada, it was more done by the microbiologists, which wasn't quite cutting edge in my opinion. So that was how I got from there to the United States, to Vanderbilt, got into infectious disease, another great experience. I mean, I must say this, that coming from McGill, where, you're the top-notch university in Canada, you come to Vanderbilt, and the professors that I had, man, I was like in awe. These guys were like walking dictionaries about medicine. And I was saying, my goodness, I'm from McGill, and these guys know so much. Oh, it was awe-inspiring. And from there, I went to the Centers for Disease Control and did some more work, then came up to Harvard University in Washington, D.C. So I've been around. I think I've had a great experience in terms of training. And I mean, I give all the glory to God, really.
Wow, that's amazing and inspiring. So you ended up at Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt is known as like the Harvard of the South, like
Yep.
rigorous academics, great faculty. And you mentioned the CDC, that's the Center for Disease Control, based in Atlanta, Georgia. Can you tell me a little bit more about that experience working there?
So the experience at CDC was out of this world. I mean, you're working with top class scientists, people who've been around the world, people who investigate outbreaks of disease and solve them. I mean, today I'm a little disappointed with where CDC has gone, but at that time it was, the CDC is the institution in the United States that was credited with eliminating smallpox. So one of my most memorable experiences was that one winter, there was an outbreak of rubella, German measles, in Maine, and it was sweeping across the state. And so someone had to go investigate this outbreak. And we were called at that time epidemic intelligence officers. We were like the CIA of epidemics and diseases.
Right.
So I was whistled off to Maine to try to track down what was happening and to report on the epidemic. And so it was a very nice experience to work with the state health department officials as well as the folks back in Atlanta. And, one of my first experiences that was really nice and at the same time chilling was that while I was there, I got grabbed by a bevy of reporters. I had never gone talking to the media. These guys, you got to tell us something. You got to tell us something. And before long, I was sitting up front, and there were 4 or 5 photographers around flashing, and people with their mics in my face wanting to know what was happening. Wow. And then, of course, the next day, 1 or 2 did misquote me. But, I learned the hard way what to do and not to do when you have to deal with the media.
That's amazing. So working for the CDC and working with amazing people, I'm sure it has allowed you to learn a lot about how diseases work. And we're going to pivot into this question. A lot of folks have been, traumatized, and we have gone through a lot, anxiety, fear in 2020 about the pandemic. And now that we're in 2021, what advice or words of wisdom would you give to those who are worried about the pandemic and also the vaccination?
So I think as far as the pandemic goes right now, we're talking about the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2. I think there's really a bright ray at the end of the tunnel. I think we aren't at the right rate exactly yet, but we're getting towards it. And so I think that people can be reasonably hopeful and looking forward to in time, we won't have to be quarantined and be wearing a mask everywhere we go. So I'm hopeful. I think it will take us a little time yet, but I'm very hopeful that 2021 will be a better year in terms of managing the epidemic than it is right now. Because when it started, we really had a lot to learn about this peculiar virus. It just is not the typical virus. But we learned a lot, and I think the progress that has been made has been outstanding from a scientific standpoint.
I'm glad to hear that. And I'm praying for the same outcome, that we would have a better management of the situation and that things would get better so that we can continue to live our best lives. And, I'm grateful, even though we're in this pandemic and we're in quarantine, I'm grateful for health and for life. And it's allowed us to also focus on the things that really, really, really matter. So although it's been difficult, we have really been challenged to rethink our priorities. And so I thank you for
Yeah,
sharing
even
that word of
church.
encouragement.
Yeah,
Yes.
even church. I mean, it is really forced us to prioritize what church really means is just a building and ways to communicate like what we're doing right now. This probably wouldn't have happened. And so I
Right.
think even when we go back to church, and a lot of people I think will not go back to church, but we can still continue to communicate online in the various platforms and reach other people.
Awesome. Awesome. So I must ask this question because I am the host and I have the mic and no one can take it from me. So have you taken the vaccine? If not, why? And also, are you planning to if you haven't?
So I'm planning to. It hasn't been offered to me yet. As you know, there's a tier. The first tier are those who are directly involved in patient care. So I'm not in that group. So yeah, if it comes to me, I'll be ready to take it when it comes because, I think given my age and my medical conditions and so on, I think that it will be important to take the vaccine. Um, I certainly wouldn't want to end up on a ventilator because then your odds are so much against you. So I'd rather take the vaccine. Nothing is perfect, mind you, but I think the vaccine is a reasonable choice to make at this time for those, particularly those who may have a chronic medical condition or those who are older. If you're younger, you may say, well, let me wait. And I have no argument with that. But what I have an argument against is those who are, for no good reason, just opposed to the vaccine. I don't think that makes any sense. But, to each his own.
Okay. Well, thank you for being honest about your opinion and sharing that perspective. I want to circle back to your story. You've done a lot. You've been a lot of places. You've traveled the world and also the States, working in different regions. When did you move back to New Jersey and how did you become a member of the Church of the Oranges?
So I moved from Washington, D.C., where I was, to New Jersey. I came here alone the first year and left my wife and the kids back in Washington, D.C., because I was taking a year sabbatical. I wasn't sure I'd want to stay in pharmaceutical research. So as time went on, I figured, well, a year wasn't enough. And it was interesting enough that I thought I'd stay. So the family moved in 1998. So when we came, we visited many churches. Actually, we were attracted to TNAC Church. It's just that it was far from where we live in Edison. So, but we visited many, many churches. We weren't all that impressed with most of them. We came to the Church of the Oranges, and for a while, we didn't find it very friendly either. And we almost didn't go there, but we met one family, the Pascals, who were extraordinarily nice to us. And because of their friendship and their reaching out to us, I tell you, it just makes a difference what people can impact they can have on you. And because of that, we decided to keep coming there, and we got to like the Church of the Oranges. And as you know, we've both become very, very involved in the church over time.
Right, right. That is so powerful. A lot of people have some not so pleasant experiences sometimes at church, but a lot of times it's that one relationship that can be the catalyst and the difference maker. And so I want folks to take note and to remember to be kind, and remember that you also never get a second chance to make a first impression. And on behalf of the Church of the Oranges, although I was not there, I apologize for whomever was mean to you. But we're so glad you're a part of our family at Kodo.
Thank you.
So you mentioned being involved at the church. Sometimes when I see you, you have a nice camera in your hands. Can you share with us about some of your passions and interest?
Yeah, so I've been really interested in photography since high school. Was a president of our photographic club, participated in many photographic exhibitions, did very well. And then that was before the era of the digital cameras. As digital cameras came along, I got involved as well. And, it's just something that I find very relaxing and very creative. And I've tried to get people involved at the church over the years. I've got run some photography clubs. We've had some photography exhibitions. But, what I've found is that many people are not really as passionate as I am. And to be successful in anything in life, whether it's your hobby or your work, you have to be dedicated and committed.
Mm,
And this is one of the things I find frustrating sometimes with our folks. It's like, yeah, now I go. And the same thing comes back to planning, particularly since I've had some experience working in the corporate world. I try to use what I've learned there to make things in the church environment better. But there's so much resistance, and there's
mm,
the attitude that, well, that's for the world, that's not for church. But there are things we can learn. And
yeah.
one of the most important lessons is that you need to spend time planning.
Mm,
I once read some work by Napoleon Hill, I think it's in the book Think and Grow, which says, you need to have thinking time, planning time, and action time.
mm.
And from preparing sermons and so on, you spend more time in the preparation than the actual delivery.
Oh,
You
a
just
lot
can't
more
wait
time.
till the last minute. And I
Yeah.
find that that's one thing that has been very important in my success. I spend time thinking, planning, and then studying or doing the action. And that's,
Mm.
I think, a good philosophy to adopt for those who want to be successful in whatever they do.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Thank you for mentioning that because a lot of people have the skill, a lot of people have the interest, but they don't have the commitment and they don't have the stick to itiveness to continue to grow and develop and do those things behind the scenes that really help with the outcome. And so it's not about the limelight and when it's time to shine, but it's about the grind behind the lights and behind the scenes, those Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours that really help you to become great.
Absolutely.
So thank you for mentioning that. And so you're passionate about photography. You're passionate about medicine and diseases. Go ahead, continue.
So the other passion I have is teaching. And
Mm,
teaching in a sense of translating science so that everyone can understand, translating biblical stuff so people can understand. So my
mm,
Sabbath school class, which I'm very passionate about, again, I try to make it real. I find that a lot of religion, a lot of doctrine can be irrelevant to people because they can't connect.
right.
And I think we need to be living examples in the true meaning of that, not just focused on doctrines and rules. And we're so caught up in this sometimes. And so we don't connect with people. We
Mm,
need to connect with people first. And that's my big beef with a lot of the way that we teach and show and demonstrate religion. It's like, what did you do? How many people did you talk? That's not the point. We need to be examples.
yeah, yeah.
People read us more than what we say we believe or what doctrine we have.
Hmm.
So, my other issues are things like accountability. You
Mm,
know, you have to be accountable. We're going to be accountable to God, but we're accountable also to people around us.
right.
And one of the frustrations for me is that you rely on people to work in a team, and often there's not that team connectedness and spirit that you would like.
Yeah.
So it's challenging to, keep pushing on when folks aren't also trying to be, good team players is what I would call it. But
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
I think of also a little bit of philosophy. I like the words of some philosophers. And there's one little maxim that I fall back on a lot when I'm tempted to really become upset. And this is from Baruch Spinoza. You might know Spinoza. He says, do not weep. Do not wax indignant.
Hmm.
Understand. So sometimes we need to step back and just understand, why are people not behaving the way I would want them to? Don't get
Hmm.
mad and upset. Don't wax indignant, as Spinoza says. And don't weep.
Mm,
Just try to understand what's happening. And understanding is so important. We don't know why people behave the way they do sometimes. And another philosopher, Philo, says, always be kind to people because you don't know what burden they're carrying.
yeah. Very, very powerful, powerful points. Thank you for for dropping those gems of wisdom. We're going to have to play this video back to write these down because these are just amazing. So you talked about it's important for us to think, important for us to plan, and important for us to execute. Now, within that same vein, I'm curious, what are some of your goals or aspirations or things that you're planning to do within the next 5 to 10 years?
The first one's easy: retire. But that doesn't mean I won't keep up. I love reading. I read extensively on many different things, and I really won't ever give up. Continue my photography. One of the things that I really want to try to achieve within my Sabbath school class is a small area, but then in the wider church, I really want to help people see that Jesus is not this tyrant that we have to worry about and be so caught up with doctrines about. Help people paint a more positive picture of Jesus so that not only you can love him, but that you can tell others why you love him.
Yeah.
The image that I grew up with, and I think many people, is that God is so exacting and demanding and revengeful, and he's watching every little mistake and you make. He's like, people are so caught up, for example, in what I call silly things. Like, should you have a Christmas tree in your house? Well, why don't you learn to be more compassionate and more forgiving and loving? We are missing so many things that are more important, So I hope to be able to make more of an impact and helping people have a more positive view of Jesus, more so than becoming an Adventist. I mean, that's the secondary issue.
Yeah.
So that's not my goal. My goal is to help people see the beauty, the mercy, the compassion, the kindness of Jesus.
Yes.
And then those things will motivate you. It will just flow from you.
Yeah.
And that's the way I think we need to have church. And not, it doesn't have to be yelling and shouting and screaming when you preach. I mean, first of all, that turns me off, honestly. And I know it turns off some of the young people. I mean, my kids, for example, why are they shouting so much? So, we've gotten into this vein that we think that people will only listen or understand if we yell and shout. And the sad thing now is that some people now in the congregation are so used to it that if you don't yell and shout and scream, they don't think you preach a good sermon. What nonsense. So that's one of my little concerns as well. But I think we need to paint a more positive picture of who Christ is. The other things will follow. To me, that is a central message of the gospel, and that we don't give enough credit to.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Dr. Greaves. It's all about Jesus. All about Jesus. I heard a pastor once say that Christianity is our identity, but Adventism is our mission. So we are Christians first, but we are Adventists proclaiming the return of Jesus. But first and foremost, we are Christians. And so those traits of compassion, kindness, these things should be at the forefront of what we do and also who we are if we want to be a true witness in these last days. So thank you for saying that.
And I'm not saying, you shouldn't read your quarterly, you should read Mrs. White's books. Right. That's fine. But guys, you can read all of that stuff.
Yeah.
If your heart isn't transformed, forget all those books. And there's one more thing I want to put in here for those who are listening who are younger folks. Folks come to me all the time and ask me, well, Dr. Greaves, I'm thinking of doing medicine. What do you think? And I say to them, listen, doing medicine is not about you. Doing law is not about you. Doing engineering is not about you. Think and let God talk to you about what he wants you to do.
Yeah.
If he wants you to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, he will make a way for you if you leave your life open to him. It's not about the glory and the fuzz and all this stuff.
Right.
And I really want young folks, all of us, to understand this stuff. We are given gifts to use while we're here. And God expects us to use them to the best of our ability. It's not about showing off or to make money and all this stuff. We really need to be clear about this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said. It's not just about the money. It's not just about the income, but about the outcome that we can make as followers of Jesus Christ. And so I want people to remember that no matter what profession you are in, whether you're a janitor, a pastor, a doctor, an engineer, a car mechanic, you are a minister, and God can use you to make a positive difference and to build the kingdom of God. And so, Yeah, seek God, pray, ask God, Lord, what can I do to be of service to you? You have created me. You know me better than anybody else. You have the owner's manual. So God, lead me and guide me to my purpose. So thank you for mentioning that, Dr. Greaves. So you mentioned counsel to young people. I'm just curious if you could have a conversation with your younger self, with your 20-year-old self, and you could give your 20-year-old self advice, what advice would you give?
I think I would want to be more open. I think at that time in my life, because of cultural influences and those around me, I was very rigid
Hmm.
and narrow-minded and not open enough to listen to others with a different perspective on life. And as I've gotten older and met other people, I've learned to listen to people and not just who we categorize them as. A classic example, when I was in early medicine, I had to go see a patient, and this patient was, transgender patient. I didn't know. And I went and addressed this individual as if it were a he, but it was not she. And they were so angry. And to me, it was like, I was angry about them. Why are you
Hmm.
angry at me? So over time, I've learned to appreciate that people do different things for different reasons. While God doesn't condone actions that may be contrary to his word, he doesn't reject the individual. He
Mm-hmm.
always gives the individual a chance. And so I had to learn and grow in understanding and in compassion. At that time in my life, I really wasn't. I was as rigid, and this is the only way to go. It's black and white, and nothing
Mm.
else will change my mind. And yeah, so that's something that I'd want to be changed, to be a little bit more open-minded and less rigid, less like a Pharisee.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice. Great advice. Well, Dr. Greaves, we thank you so much for sharing your story and allowing us to be inspired by your journey. And we thank you for spending time with us here. And we want to encourage each and every person to continue to support the podcast. And here's how you can support: not just subscribe and share it on Facebook or YouTube, but you can request to be a guest on this amazing podcast, because on this show, every person is just a name until you know their story. Dr. Greaves, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And we thank you for supporting the Juice and the Orange podcast. And we look forward to seeing you next time for episode 12. God bless you and take care.